Many of you may remember the story of the based Stickman. As the story goes, the battle for Berkeley. A man showed up, and it was the first time anyone actually fought back against far-left extremists. He had a shield, a helmet, and a stick. He cracked that stick over an Antifa member's head when that Antifa member was violently assaulting and beating people. They called him the based Stickman because he had a stick. There's a new Stickman in town. You know, and I want to say this. I'm not a fan of violence. I think it should only be applied when absolutely necessary. And people have a right to defend themselves. We got this viral video that I want to talk about. Joel Fisher tweets, "Since New York City doesn't do much, the hardworking people have no choice but to take matters into their own hands." Great job, guys. Here's the video. Let me play some of this video for you.
Nothing you can do, though. There's nothing you can do, man, until you call police. Ain't nothing you can do, man, until police come in. Hey, don't. Hey, ain't nothing you can do, man. Don't.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. You can watch the video on Twitter. Cassandra Fairbanks has a tweet of it up, at Cassandra Rules. But I want to address what's going on with crime. In this video, a guy is saying, nothing you can do. Nothing you can do. As a man is stealing from behind the counter at a convenience store. What happens? This guy's got a weapon of some sort, and he threatens to pull it out. He does pull it out, then puts it back. They grab him, and then the store owner begins to beat him with a stick. Man, I don't like the violence. I got to be completely honest. I don't, I'm not going to. I wish it didn't come to this. But this guy brandished a weapon and threatened their lives. Like, what are you supposed to do? Now, they end up hitting this guy. And the memes, they are emerging. But I saw this and I started to think about something. Was the mafia really that bad? Honestly, I don't know. It's a serious question. It's not rhetorical. I was watching a clip from A Bronx Tale that people had posted. You may have seen the movie. I have not seen the movie, but it's an excellent scene. Here's what happens. And I tremendous respect. I mean, let's talk about this. Let's talk about masculinity. Some bikers ride their bikes up. You got the mob boss. He's talking to some guys. When all of a sudden they hear, bah, 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 right? People are yelling. And they're like, what's going on? So the mob boss walks into this bar. And here he sees a bunch of dudes wearing biker gear. And he says, what's the problem? And they say something like, they're not dressed properly to be in here. And the lead biker guy says, look, man, we just want to have a drink. We just want to have a beer. We're being polite. We're being nice. Just let us have a beer and we'll go. And the mob boss says, spoken like a gentleman. Serve them their beer. And I loved that. An honorable man. You know, you're supposed to dress nice to come in here, but you were polite and respectful to me. I will be respectful to you. The way men should be. Now what happens? When the bartender hands the beers to these guys, they shake him up and start spraying the bartender with it, laughing. And the mob boss says, okay, now you've crossed the line. You need to leave. Now the biker guy says, screw off, F you, blah, blah, blah. And so what does a mob boss do? He calmly straightens his tie, walks to the door, closes it, locks it, walks back up to the guys and says, now's yous can't leave. And then they all have this look like, uh-oh. Now look, after this, a group of good old boys come in and begin to mercilessly beat these bikers. I'm not saying I'm a fan of the mercilessly beat the guys. I do have a certain degree of letting police take care of this because we want honest justice. We want people to know when a crime is committed, our system handles it properly. But the point I'm trying to make is when you have a story like that, and the assumption is if you're an honorable person of good standing and you're polite, we treat you with respect. But if you cross the line, then you pay the consequences. A society like that does not have this rampant crime. Here's what happens. These guys are being robbed in this convenience store. And the dude at the counter is saying, ain't nothing you can do about it. Well, this guy pulls out some kind of weapon. I think it was a knife. And then all of a sudden, game's on. But I was thinking about that and I'm like, what if there was a mafia, an organized crime unit? Like, not unit, like, what if there was actual organized crime? I'm not talking about gangs. I'm talking about suit-wearing good old boys. You'd never see anything like that. Now, I'm not saying the mafia was good or anything. I mean, there's like shootouts and, just bad stuff for sure. But I wonder if the real issue is just a culture of honor. You know, coming from Chicago, we knew about a bunch of different gangs. Some of these gangs had no honor. They didn't care. They'd lie, cheat, or steal. Some of these gangs were deeply, deeply respected. I'm not going to say which ones because, I'm not here to start bickering about gangs in Chicago. But there were like different branches of the gangs. But there was like one gang, they would just do drugs and like mind their own business, and everyone thought it was funny. You'd see them hanging out smoking weed, and they'd smile and be like, "What up?" And you were like, "These guys are cool. Like they don't do anything, Like they weren't bothering anybody, they didn't have guns, they weren't shooting anybody." But they were a well-known gang. And so sometimes they'd get into fights because they defend each other, but for the most part, they were chill, never bothered anybody. And I think they mostly just sold pot or something. Then there was another group that would steal from everybody, then claim if you defended yourself, you were sliding the gang, and they'd come after you. Really, really bad stuff. One of the biggest gangs, which extends well outside of Chicago, it was massive, massive, massive gang. They had young guys who were reckless and older guys who were kind of like that mob boss I described. And for this reason, people respected them. I remember, encountering, some guys in these gangs. These younger guys were hot-headed and would push people around and be like, "I'm in a gang, blah, blah, blah." And you'd be like, don't get into it with those guys because they just cause problems. However, if these young guys acted a fool, the 30, 40-year-old gang members who were higher ranking in the gang would come and apologize to you, grab the dude and say, "You don't do this in our community," because they had a way of going about things. And it really does come down to this. You can argue that some of these gang leaders were, good guys that just wanted to respect the community. I think it's simpler than that. They don't want people to shut them down. And if these young guys act a fool, then what happens is the people who live there go to the police and say, "We demand a crackdown." All of a sudden, business is done. So these gangs knew that they could get away with committing crimes, mostly selling drugs. But I'm not talking hard stuff. It was a lot of marijuana, like it sounded a lot of pot. Business was good. They sold pot. They had territory. They protected their own. And as long as nobody got out of line, business was a booming. So when these young guys would act a fool, they would say, "We don't do this in our town." But rest assured, if you came into their neighborhood and tried looting his Gucci store, like we see in this video, or robbing a convenience store, these guys would show up and say, "Nah, these are our businesses." It's kind of like the protection money racket thing, right? You have the story where the mob guys go into the convenience store and say, "You got to pay us to keep you safe." It's funny because, honest question, with this video of this guy robbing this convenience store, if a local group of good old boys wearing suits walked in and said, "You're going to pay us $100 a month, and this ain't never going to happen to you again," you think they'd pay it? I think they would. And I think they'd do it with a smile on their face. They'd say, "Thank you, man. Thank you." Now, I don't know if it's typically $100. Typically, the shakedowns were for more than that. But my point is simply this. A group of people come in and they tell you it'll never happen again. And you know it won't because these guys are going around keeping everybody in line. And even the police who don't want to enforce these laws know what's up. Crime stops. This kind of crime. Someone coming in and ransacking your business. Because here's how the mob would see it. The gangs would see it. So long as you're selling those cigarettes and you're selling those goods, we come in, you pay us for security, we're happy. But if someone comes in and trashes your business and shuts it down, we lose money. So it's a question of to what degree do people tolerate the shakedown, right? I guess I can put it this way. We'd be better off completely with the right to defend ourselves. And if everyone knew that if you tried to steal or ransack a business, you were putting your life on the line, they'd be less inclined to do it. But in New York, there's no good old boys. There's no gangs to protect these businesses or to have an interest in extracting from them in a more organized way. All there is if you dare defend yourself, you go to jail. Well, sooner or later, my friends, that system will break. And I think we're seeing it now with these dudes beating this guy with a stick. The Stickman, the stick guy, whatever they want to call him. Because sooner or later, people are going to say, enough. The crime's out of control. San Francisco is in the gutter. Stores are being looted like crazy. What is this, Beverly Hills once again? And you know what people say? Nothing you can do about it. So what happens? The businesses start collapsing. San Francisco is in collapse. So I ask you this, and I'm not asserting my opinion on this one, genuine question. What would be better if there was a mafia operating in San Francisco, organized crime, or what it is now? You can argue there's going to be people being whacked. There's going to be shootouts. It's going to be horrible. And I'm like, there already are. There's human waste in the streets. I guess with the mafia, you get clean. You get businesses that can operate even if they're getting shaken down. I am not saying one is better than the other. Perhaps, as I mentioned, the real solution is people have the right to defend themselves and their property, like in Texas. But whether or not that changes, it's going to require a cultural shift where we all agree on it. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up later today on this channel. I think maybe at 4 p.m. perhaps. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.